in the Egyptian desert, an ancient pyramid has just been discovered. Hieroglyphics near the entrance indicate it was built to honor the falcon-headed god Horus, but they also speak of a cult worshipping the evil god Set. 8 brave adventurers are preparing to explore the pyramid, its secrets, and its dangers. Okay, I don't know if I could get much more of a cheesy opening than that. So today, we're going to take a look at the Adventurers, the Pyramid of Horus. Now, this is not a brand new game. There's a new version of another Adventurers coming out, but it is brand new to me, so I wanted to go ahead and take some time and share with you my thoughts, share with you some ideas around the gameplay. And I promise in advance, because I am not Egyptian nor was anywhere near Egypt, I'm probably going to slaughter half of the names that I talk about in this review, so I apologize in advance. But if you are familiar with the Adventurers, this is the second, I believe, of 3. The third one is just coming out right now. Some of the familiar faces are here, and we'll do a quick run by here to give you an idea of what the minis look like and what their cards look like. But this is a 2 to 6 player game designed by Frederick Henry and Guillaume Blossier, I think is how you say it. Again, apologize if I slaughter them. It is a press your luck, run through a dungeon, or in this case a temple, get as much treasure as you can and get out. But it's done in a little bit of a different way, and it's very interesting. So probably the easiest way to kind of walk you through this is just walk you through the gameplay, so you can get an understanding of how that works and get an idea of what's really good and what's kind of not so good. The first thing you'll notice, and this is really probably my only kind of odd part about this game. So this is the entrance to the pyramid, and on the board there are different levels, I guess is the easiest way to describe it. This area right here is the snake pit. There are lower level treasures, some equipment that can help you, and there's also snakes that will bite you. Then when you get in here, this ring, this kind of beige ring, is the scorpion pit. And if you search for treasure in there, you're going to have the potential to get hit by a scorpion, but you'll get a little bit better treasure around this ring than you would get if you were in the snake pit. Then in the center is the crocodile pit. Only truthfully crazy people go searching for danger or searching for treasure in a crocodile pit. But obviously, again, better treasure, higher chance of getting bit though as you go in. So lower treasure, better treasure, really good treasure. Slow chance of getting bit, medium chance of getting bit, and high chance of getting bit. Now you'll also notice there is a corridor, or actually 3 corridors around where there are 3 mummies already in place. These mummies will basically wander, and their facing is very important. So you'll notice that we have one facing to the left, one facing forward there, and one facing to the right. These are all Egyptian mummies like Imhotep and Sankhet and all those kind of guys. But each turn, these guys are going to roam up and down the hallways, turn around, and they'll stay within their own hallway, protecting their sarcophaguses here, or sarcophagi. And if you end up touching them or them touching you, you get damage and so on and so forth. Now, as I mentioned, each area has their own treasure decks. So corresponding back to the deck, corresponding back to the deck you search, and corresponding back to the deck that you search. The interesting thing is when you're setting up the game, there is a spot for each of these decks, so you can tell really easily what deck goes on what in the background. Ironically and oddly, there is a spot for everything except for these cards, which are the mummy cards. These are what you get when you get touched by a mummy. They are the same on both sides. There's no difference. It's just a whole bunch of them. But there's no spot on the board, so we just kind of put ours there, which is a little weird. The other thing you'll notice is that each of the sarcophagus has a treasure card, and there's a spot for each one. There's an icon for each god of which is there, and there is an idol. So you'll notice on the board, and it may be easier for me to show you the straight side facing here, there's a sarcophagi and a treasure inside of it, along 5 of them, and then there is an idol, and then there's an idol that you can capture. Idols are very tricky. They're worth a lot of points, though. As you can see, this one is worth 8. This one here is worth 6. I'll explain how you capture those in a minute. But essentially, the mummy treasures are usually really, really good. There are some that are bad, but there are some that are really, really good. And if you can get the Idol of Horus, that's 10 points. That one's pretty hard to get, and we'll explain why in a minute. So the idea of the game is that you come into this temple, you have two actions, you have two different types of actions that you can do. You can move or you can search. And searching basically means, let's assume I'm David Gore here for the example. If I had a certain number of actions, I could come in here, search, I could draw a card from this deck, and this would be a necklace worth 1 point. So everyone gets to see that, and then I put it face down in front of me. So on and so forth. Now inside of this deck, you will notice that there are necklaces of different value. So there's like 1s and 2s. You'll also notice that there are snake bites, which will be a damage to you. And there is equipment, kind of like this bag, which lets you put more treasures in it, or a ujat, which is basically a necklace that will let you see the falling stones. Stones. Did I mention stones? Yes. There's a lot of stones in this game. An awful lot of stones in this game. In fact, how you end up dying is after everyone has had a turn during a round, one of these blocks is going to get randomly chosen, and you'll notice underneath it there is a number 11. You match up to the number on the actual board, and boom, down comes a block. Now what's bad about that? Well, let's assume I was on that space and number 11 comes down crushing me. The first thing that happens is I get a wound card telling me, hey, you got hit by a block. The next thing that happens is my guy has to move in a straight line to a different space. So if I was trying to get into the temple, I may want to move myself that way. If I was trying to get out of the temple, I may want to move myself that way. So that seems okay, right? It's manageable. You get a wound card and everything is cool. Well, what happens is during the course of the game, you're going to have multiple blocks falling on you after every turn. If this were to happen and all of these blocks fall, the pyramid is sealed off. You can't move diagonally, so anyone on this side forward is sealed in with the mummies forever. Everyone on this side back has still a chance to get out. Now, when I said you can't move diagonally, that means this type of scenario also means that it is sealed. It also means that this type of scenario also means it's sealed. So not only do these things fall on top of you and damage you, but they also have a really good chance of sealing you off. And yes, if you do your statistics correctly, you could lose this game in as little as 4 rounds, which is pretty painful. It adds to the tension, and it adds quite nicely to the tension. It's not a game where you can mathematically work out, okay, this is how much time I have left. You can, to an extent, if you really want to spend a lot of time on math, taking over how many blocks are left, what the odds are of picking one. But the reality is, as you're playing the game, you're going to be frantically trying to get as much treasure as you can so that you can get out and be safe. Sometimes it's not about pressing your luck and being so greedy, but just greedy enough to get what you can and get out. Now, in terms of actions, basically every turn there is going to be a first player, and that's represented by the Ankh. You're going to count up underneath your character cards, you're going to have these little sliders. And what you have is at the very top, the left shows how many cards you have between treasures and wounds. And then the right shows the number needed on the die when it's rolled for a successful action for you to get. So what I mean by that is, let's say this is the beginning of the game and I have 0 cards. This does not count as a card, it just counts as a first player marker. I have 0 cards. I would roll 5 dice, and anything 2 or higher I would have an action on. So in this case, I would get 5 actions. I would move my character up to show I have 5 actions, and then as I take them, I can move this down to show 4, 3, 2, and 1. Anyone who has 0 and 3 that round will get 2 actions. Now let's assume another player had 5 cards. Well, that means 3 and higher would give them an action. So they would only get 4 actions, whereas everyone else would have 5 actions. So the more things you carry and the more wounds that you get hit with, the higher number that's needed at the beginning of a round to get an action, and the harder it's going to be for you to get actions to be moving. So if you are all the way deep in here in the crocodile pit and you're carrying 10 to 12 things, that means every time the dice are rolled, you need a 5 or higher to have an action, and if this was your roll, you would only get 1 action. So you could only move 1 measly space, or search, or that's it. So while it is get as much as you can, the more that you carry, the slower you're going to be. Now probably the only last mechanic to really talk about is if you're going after an idol. idols, you will notice, are at the corners, and they have little temple icons or little different icons different than the sarcophagi. Now on each one, you'll see at the bottom dice, and it shows you 1, 2, 3. Shows you over here 1, 2, 3, 4, and then on Horus is 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Think of it like Yahtzee. If I'm there and I want to be able to get this temple or this idol, then I would roll my dice as an action, and I would get 1, 2, 4, 4, 5. So then, if I have any more actions, I can choose to keep my 1 and 2 and re-roll any number of dice. So I'd re-roll and I'd get my 3. Therefore, I would have that 3. I can flip it over to see what it is, and then I can take it. Now again, remember, these are good because this one is worth 6 points. They're bad because they will curse you. Now that you have this idol, you are cursed by the green die, which means in all future rolls when determining your actions, you do not get to count the green die. So again, if I had 10 to 12 cards and we're rolling for actions and you need a 5 or higher and that green is a 5 or a 6, that's the way it goes. You don't get that as an action. So valuable to get in terms of points, bad to get in terms of actions. Overall, there is one more thing to point out. This is probably the weirdest thing. Remember earlier I talked about how there was no space for the mummy cards? For some reason the board stops. I still don't understand this. So the the Idol of Horus is really good to get because it's 10 points. This one, unlike the others where you have to be on the corners, this one you can be on either of these two spaces. This is hard because that means it's closer for this mummy Soniket to get to you, or Sonket to get to you. But again, it's worth 10 points. It will curse you for the yellow die, meaning you can't use the yellow die anymore, but it is pretty valuable if you can get it. But it stops. It just, all these other areas have spaces for their cards, and this just stopped. So I get it from a sizing perspective. It would have been kind of nice to have that little extra piece right there. Or if that wasn't possible, then maybe just cut the board off at each side there. I know it's aesthetics, I'm nitpicking, but it's one of those things that kind of jumps out at you while you're playing. So as you can tell, as I've been walking through this, both the artwork of the game, the artwork of the box is really, really nice. It's got a real Indiana Jones feel to it. It's got a very Egyptian feel to it, obviously, because of all the culture involved with it and everything. And there are even, we don't have them, but there are models and minis that you can buy that are pre-painted if you don't want to paint them yourself. They do come with these little plastic colored bottoms that you can change in and out if you don't have those. So it's very easy to tell who's who on the board, even if they're not painted. Overall, game is really, really fun. There's a couple of different strategies you can employ to it, and the game is never the same twice because the blocks are dropping randomly all over the place. There are some nice features in that each player has their own ability that they can use once per game, and the rulebook will tell you about that. But to give you an example, like Maki Watanabe can avoid a snake or a scorpion sting. You have a really nice thing with Edgar Rice where he can avoid a crocodile bite because he's got swimming. So he can get into that crocodile pit, search for treasure, and if he gets hit, he can avoid that one. And David Gore has the ability to shoot a mummy point blank and knock him over and walk into his space and not take any damage. Now, the kicker with those is you can only use them once per game, so you have to really time them and make sure that you use them at the right time. Probably, if there's anything I could add aside from just maybe changing the board a little bit, is just the ability to somehow, somewhere in one of these treasures, be able to move a block. As playing a couple of games, it just seems like it would be so much fun to have some kind of mechanic where maybe you could get rid of some treasure, or you could use a piece of equipment or something to say, hey, let's just move this one block once per game. That would be really nice, because I'll tell you, there's nothing worse than when you're in there and you think everything's cool and the block drops and you're shot. But that is another fun part of the game, is that tension and that press your luck feel of, man, this could end at any minute, but I really got to push it. Very social game, very fun game. There's a lot of times where even though it's competitive, you're trying to help each other out, say, hey, this is kind of the best thing you could do here. Because even though you could work as a team, those blocks are still going to drop on their own and it's still going to hurt everybody as it comes around. So overall, very, very, very fun game. This is something that you can enjoy with 2 players. It is something you can enjoy with 6 players and in between. The box does say, I think, 13 and up for the ages. I've already played a game with my 6-year-old, and he absolutely loves it and enjoys it, understands it, and was even utilizing some strategy on his own as to when to use Edgar's avoiding the crocodile bite ability. It's a very quick game. It usually takes about maybe 30-45 minutes to play. The setup is not too bad. It takes about maybe 10-15 minutes to set up just because of all the different cards you got to separate. But other than that, it's just an absolute ton of fun. If anyone has any questions, definitely feel free to post them here on the blog or on YouTube. You can also hit us at Facebook, which is facebook.com/critshappen, or you can reach us on Twitter as well. We hope you enjoyed this. Thanks for watching, and we hope to get you more videos soon. Take care.